Good evening, everyone. Today, we're diving into a topic that's as timeless as it is complex: how men view sex. This isn't just a conversation about intimacy, it's about understanding. It's about looking deeper than stereotypes and seeing the humanity behind every perspective. When we talk about men's views on sex, the biological aspect often takes center stage. And while it's not the entire picture, it's an important starting point. Biology plays a significant role in shaping men's desires, instincts, and behaviors when it comes to intimacy. Testosterone, often referred to as the hormone of desire, influences a man's libido. It's a natural driver present from puberty onward that impacts how men experience attraction and arousal. But here's where things often get oversimplified. Too often, society reduces men's sexual drive to mere biology as if it's purely about physical gratification. This narrative not only diminishes the complexity of male sexuality, but also overlooks the deeply emotional and psychological layers that intertwine with it. You see, for many men, sex is more than just a biological urge, it's a way to connect, to communicate, and to seek validation. The act itself often carries a message: I want to be close to you. I want to be valued. I want to be seen. These aren't just physical desires, they're deeply human ones. And while these emotions may not always be expressed overtly, they are present in the background, shaping men's experiences of intimacy. Let's also consider how this connection evolves over time. Early in life, the biological drive may seem dominant, but as men grow, their emotional needs often come to the forefront. A man in a committed relationship, for instance, may view sex not just as a source of pleasure, but as a means of deepening the bond with his partner. It becomes a way to express love, trust, and vulnerability, things that are sometimes difficult to convey in words. At its core, sex for many men is a way to break down barriers, both external and internal. It offers a moment of vulnerability where they can let their guard down and share a connection that transcends the physical. It's a space where affection, affirmation, and intimacy intersect, a blend of the biological and the emotional. However, this blend is often misunderstood. Men are sometimes seen as being singularly focused on the physical act, but this is a narrow and limiting perspective. It's like looking at the tip of an iceberg and ignoring the massive structure beneath the surface. For many men, the physical drive is merely the entry point into something much deeper: a desire for intimacy and connection that resonates on an emotional level. Understanding this interplay between biology and emotion helps us see men's perspectives on sex in a more holistic light. It reminds us that while the biological foundation is significant, it's only one part of a much richer and more complex experience. When we acknowledge both the physical and emotional dimensions, we open the door to greater empathy, better communication, and deeper connections in our relationships. When we examine how men view sex, we cannot ignore the powerful influence of societal and cultural conditioning. From an early age, boys are exposed to messages, both subtle and overt, that shape their understanding of what it means to be a man and how sex fits into that narrative. These messages come from family, peers, media, religion, and broader cultural norms. Over time, they create expectations and stereotypes that are deeply ingrained, often without men even realizing it. One of the most pervasive societal narratives is that men should always desire sex, that their worth or masculinity is somehow tied to their sexual prowess. From locker room conversations to mainstream movies, men are often portrayed as being hyper-focused on sex, always confident and in control. This portrayal reduces men's sexuality to a narrow and transactional view where the emphasis is on performance rather than connection. But let's pause and think about the pressure this creates. What happens when a man doesn't conform to this stereotype? If he doesn't always desire sex or struggles with vulnerability, he may feel ashamed or question his masculinity. These societal expectations create a rigid framework that leaves little room for individuality or emotional nuance. Media plays a significant role in reinforcing these ideas. Advertisements, TV shows, and movies frequently depict men as conquerors, In the realm of intimacy, pursuers whose primary goal is to win a partner's affection or attention. Sex is often portrayed as a prize to be earned, a conquest that validates a man's worth. Meanwhile, the emotional and relational aspects of intimacy are sidelined, leaving little space for men to explore or express the deeper dimensions of their experiences. Cultural norms also vary across regions and traditions, but many share common threads. In some cultures, sex is seen as a duty or obligation for men, while in others, it's tied to status and power. Religious teachings may also shape how men view sex, often framing it within strict moral guidelines that can either empower or constrain their sense of agency. What's particularly challenging is how these societal messages create a dichotomy. On one hand, men are expected to be dominant, confident, and always ready for intimacy. On the other hand, they are discouraged from showing vulnerability or admitting insecurities related to sex. This double standard leaves many men feeling trapped, unable to fully embrace their emotional needs, while also carrying the burden of unrealistic expectations. Moreover, societal conditioning doesn't just affect men, it also impacts their relationships. Women, too, are exposed to cultural narratives about male sexuality, which can lead to misunderstandings or assumptions. For example, a woman might interpret a man's desire for physical intimacy as purely lustful, when in reality, it might be his way of seeking emotional closeness. These misinterpretations can create friction, highlighting the need for better communication and a more nuanced understanding of each other's perspectives. When we think about men and their approach to sex, vulnerability is often the last word that comes to mind. Society rarely associates men with emotional openness, particularly in the context of intimacy. But the truth is, vulnerability plays a profound, albeit often hidden, role in how men view and experience sex. Far from being purely physical, sex can serve as a gateway for men to express emotions they may not feel comfortable sharing in other parts of their lives. From an early age, boys are conditioned to suppress vulnerability. They're told to man up, not to cry, and to project strength at all costs. This cultural messaging can create a significant barrier to emotional expression. For many men, sex becomes one of the few socially acceptable ways to let their guard down. Within the confines of intimacy, they may feel safe enough to expose their emotions, fears, and desires in ways that are otherwise difficult. However, this vulnerability is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it allows men to connect with their partners on a deeper level. On the other hand, it leaves them exposed to the possibility of rejection, judgment, or misunderstanding. This fear of being emotionally or physically vulnerable often leads men to mask their true feelings, creating a facade of cadence or detachment that doesn't reflect their inner reality. It's important to recognize that for many men, the act of sex is not just about desire, it's about affirmation. It's about feeling wanted, valued, and accepted. When a man initiates intimacy, he's often seeking more than physical pleasure. He's seeking reassurance, a sense of belonging, and a connection that transcends the physical. The willingness to initiate or participate in intimacy is in itself an act of vulnerability, a way of saying, here I am, and I hope you'll meet me in this space. But what happens when this vulnerability is met with rejection or indifference? The impact can be profound. A man who feels rebuffed in these moments may not only feel rejected physically, but also emotionally. It can lead to feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, and even shame. Over time, these experiences can create a reluctance to open up, reinforcing the societal narrative that vulnerability is a weakness rather than a strength. On the flip side, when vulnerability is embraced and reciprocated, the effects can be transformative. A man who feels emotionally safe with his partner is more likely to engage in honest communication about his needs, fears, and desires. This openness strengthens the relationship, fostering trust and deepening the emotional bond. It's a reminder that vulnerability, far from being a liability, is a pathway to genuine connection. The role of vulnerability in men's approach to sex also highlights the importance of emotional literacy. Many men lack the tools or language to articulate their feelings, particularly in the realm of intimacy. They may struggle to convey what they're really seeking, whether it's comfort, closeness, or a sense of being understood. Encouraging men to explore and express their emotions can help them navigate these complexities, allowing them to experience intimacy in a more fulfilling and authentic way. It's also worth noting that vulnerability is not a one-way street. In healthy relationships, both partners create a space where emotional openness is welcomed and valued. When men see their vulnerability met with empathy and understanding, it reinforces the idea that they don't have to shoulder the weight of emotional repression alone. It shows them that intimacy is not about perfection or performance, but about mutual support and shared humanity. When it comes to how men view sex, communication often stands as both the most vital and most overlooked aspect of the conversation. Misunderstandings about male perspectives on intimacy frequently stem from a lack of open dialogue between partners within families, even among men themselves. Without honest and clear communication, these misconceptions fester, creating unnecessary tension, unmet needs, and fractured relationships. The challenge of expressing feelings, one of the biggest barriers to effective communication about sex, is the difficulty many men face in expressing their emotions. From a young age, boys are often taught to prioritize action over words, particularly when it comes to emotional topics. Discussions about vulnerability, desire, or insecurity are rarely encouraged, leaving many men ill-equipped to articulate their feelings around intimacy. This lack of emotional vocabulary doesn't mean that men don't have complex feelings about sex. It simply means they may struggle to express them. As a result, partners may misinterpret their actions, viewing them as purely physical or surface level, when in reality, deeper emotional needs or fears are at play. Misconceptions about male desire. One of the most pervasive misconceptions is the idea that men always want sex and that their desire is purely physical. While it's true that biological factors like testosterone play a role in sexual drive, this stereotype overlooks the emotional and psychological dimensions of male sexuality. For many men, sex is as much about connection, validation, and love as it is about physical pleasure. When these emotional aspects go unacknowledged, it creates a divide between men and their partners. For example, a man's desire for intimacy might be interpreted as lust, when in reality, he may be seeking comfort or reassurance. On the flip side, if a man experiences a low sex drive or declines intimacy, he might be unfairly judged as disinterested or distant, when he could be grappling with stress, exhaustion, or insecurities. The role of assumptions in miscommunication often arises from assumptions both about what men want and how they experience intimacy. These assumptions can go both ways. Men may assume that their partners understand their needs without expressing them explicitly, while partners may assume they know what drives their male counterparts. For example, a man may believe that initiating physical touch is enough to convey his desire for emotional closeness, without realizing that his partner may need verbal affirmation or other forms of connection. Similarly, a partner may assume that a man's lack of initiation means he's disinterested, without understanding the internal pressures or fears that might be holding him back. Breaking the cycle. The importance of honest dialogue. Breaking the cycle of miscommunication requires intentional, open, and empathetic dialogue. This starts with creating a safe space where both partners feel comfortable sharing their feelings without fear of judgment or rejection. Men, in particular, need reassurance that discussing their emotional needs or vulnerabilities doesn't make them weak or less masculine. It makes them human. Effective communication also involves listening, really listening to understand rather than to respond. Partners should aim to hear each other's perspectives with curiosity and compassion, seeking to bridge gaps in understanding rather than reinforcing them. For men, this might mean articulating the emotional significance of intimacy, while for their partners, it might mean asking open-ended questions to uncover feelings that aren't immediately obvious. The role of cultural and social norms, societal norms, also play a significant role in shaping how men communicate or fail to communicate about sex. In many cultures, men are expected to exude confidence and avoid showing vulnerability, particularly in the realm of intimacy. These norms can make it challenging for men to express doubts, fears, or unmet needs. For example, a man may struggle with performance anxiety or body image concerns, but feel unable to voice these feelings for fear of appearing weak. Similarly, he might have emotional needs tied to intimacy, but hesitate to express them, assuming they won't be understood or valued. By challenging these norms and fostering a culture where emotional openness is encouraged, we can pave the way for healthier conversations about sex and relationships. The transformative power of communication, when communication is prioritized, the impact on relationships can be transformative. Misunderstandings give way to mutual understanding. Emotional needs that were once hidden come to light. Partners can work together to navigate differences in perspective, ensuring that both feel heard, valued, and fulfilled. Clear communication also helps dismantle harmful misconceptions. It allows men to share the emotional significance of intimacy, moving beyond stereotypes that paint them as one-dimensional or purely physical in their desires. It empowers both partners to approach sex not as a transactional act, but as a collaborative expression of connection, trust, and love. As we draw this conversation to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've uncovered about how men view sex. It's not a simple narrative, nor is it a one-dimensional experience. Men's perspectives on intimacy are shaped by a dynamic interplay of biology, societal expectations, emotional vulnerability, and the ever-present need for communication. We've explored how biological foundations lay the groundwork, but they are only one part of the equation. Beneath the surface, men often seek connection, affirmation, and a sense of being valued. Yet societal and cultural conditioning frequently creates rigid stereotypes, forcing men to suppress their emotional depth and conform to expectations that don't reflect their reality. Vulnerability, though rarely associated with masculinity, is a vital and transformative part of male sexuality. It's through intimacy that many men express their deepest emotions, often in ways words cannot capture. But vulnerability requires courage, and its power is only realized when it is met with empathy, understanding, and support. And then there's communication, the bridge that connects partners, dismantles misconceptions, and fosters deeper understanding. Without it, assumptions thrive and misunderstandings linger. But with open, honest dialogue, we create space for men to express themselves fully and for relationships to flourish in ways that honor both partners' needs and perspectives. The takeaway is this: men's views on sex are as nuanced and diverse as their experiences.